That beautiful peace chant was offered by students of the Vivekananda Vidyapath Academy of Indian Philosophy and Culture in Wayne, New Jersey. Good evening, and my name is Diane Crawford, and on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Vedanta Society of New York, I would like to say how happy we are that you have joined us this evening. We're commemorating the 125th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's historic speech given at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. We will now hear from the choir of the Vedanta Society of New York, led by Patrick Alexander, who will be performing a beautiful piece entitled The Mission, which follows Swami Vivekananda's voyage from his Indian homeland to Chicago of 1893. And now I have the privilege of introducing our own Swami Sarvapriyananda.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening, and namaskar to all of you. 125 years ago, Swami Vivekananda set sail from his motherland and came to the West. We all know how he came to Chicago in the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, but I met some particularly irritated folks in Vancouver who said, actually Swami Vivekananda came to Vancouver first, and nobody mentions that. That is true. And then he traveled to the United States and to the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, and the rest was history. For Swami Vivekananda, that's when he became a well-known figure on the world stage. For Hinduism, for the Interfaith movement, the legacy of Swami Vivekananda and the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, which we have seen playing out over the last 125 years. Here in the West, the doors were open to a veritable flood of teachers, Hindu teachers of different denominations, Buddhist teachers, Jain teachers, Sikh teachers from the Eastern religions. They came to the West after Swami Vivekananda, who was a pioneer in this respect. And then in the East, in India, Swami Vivekananda played a very key role in the revitalization of his religion, Hinduism, and of the motherland, India. The World Parliament of Religions was an interfaith event, and we thought it fit that we should observe the 125 years of this event with another interfaith event, and that's why we are here this evening. Other work is going on. For example, right this month, the World Parliament of Religions was organized in Toronto, in Canada, in the first week of November. Right here, we have Tony, who has started a new initiative, a Christian-Hindu dialogue, the first of which was held in this summer, and we're going to have more of that. So this work is really, really going on, and today's event marks another such effort. I welcome the wonderful young people from Vivekananda Vidyapeeth who did this beautiful chanting just a little while ago. The institute bears the name of Swami Vivekananda, so welcome to you. I welcome, of course, the very distinguished members of this panel, whom we shall hear from throughout this evening, and the members of the Vedanta Society, guests among whom I already recognize some eminent leaders of churches in the New York area, community leaders in the New York and New Jersey area, and many others, some I know and some I do not know. So welcome to all of you, and I hope we have a very enjoyable and productive evening. Thank you.
Mr. William Davis will now offer a recitation of Swami Vivekananda's actual speech given that memorable day on September the 11th, 1893.
Before I begin, I just want to note that on the first day of the Parliament, the audience was hearing from various speakers, and it was customary to begin your talk, "Ladies and gentlemen," a respectful way to address the audience. You know, they're not just ordinary people, they're ladies and gentlemen. But hear how Swamiji starts, and now I'll begin. Sisters and brothers of America. It fills my heart with joy unspeakable to rise in response to the warm and cordial welcome which you have given us. I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. I thank you in the name of the mother of religions, and I thank you in the name of millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far-off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the world. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I am proud to belong to a religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. Quote, as the different streams having their sources in different places all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee, unquote. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Quote, whosoever comes to me through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. Unquote. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time has come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal.
We are honored to have as our moderator this evening Swami Atmarupananda, Minister, Vedanta Society of Greater Houston. He is a monk of the Ramakrishna Order of India and a renowned writer, scholar, and teacher. He joined the order in 1969 in Chicago and over the decades has spent almost 14 years in India. For many years, he was engaged in pioneering work as the resident minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, San Diego, and then as the resident minister of the Vivekananda retreat at Stone Ridge, New York. More recently, he spent 5.5 years at the headquarters of the order in India, working on a new edition of the complete works of Swami Vivekananda in 10 volumes. For many years, Swami Atmarupananda has been actively engaged in interreligious dialogue here in the Americas and around the world, including international conferences on Hindu-Buddhist dialogue, Hindu-Islamic dialogue, and the pursuit of a spiritual foundation for societies around the world. I will now hand the proceedings over to Swami Atmarupananda, who will introduce the members of the panel.
Thank you, Diane. It's a great privilege for me to be here among this panel, the very distinguished members of the panel. And I have the privilege of being able to answer them to ask them questions. That's the easy part. They have to answer. That's the hard part. So I have the easy job tonight, but it's a delightful job. Or I should say, and it's a delightful job. I thought that instead of asking the panelists just to speak about interreligious dialogue from their perspective, I would ask each one a specific question about their tradition. It's not necessarily the most important question about their tradition, but it's one that I thought would be illuminating to an audience like this. Usually a gathering like this draws people who already believe in the need for interreligious dialogue, and so we don't need to justify the discussion. Rather, I wanted to bring out certain ideas that might be illuminating to all of us. And we'll go through one round. Each member of the panel will have 5 minutes to speak. And then we will go around a second time where each panelist will say something about something someone else on the panel spoke about. For instance, somebody might hear what Rabbi Spratt to my left speaks about and say that, oh, I would like to speak on that from my tradition standpoint. So like that, everyone here will have a chance to say something about something someone else has spoken on. So we're going to begin with Rabbi Benjamin Spratt, and I will introduce each speaker as we come to them. So Rabbi Spratt was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in May 2008, concentrating in Jewish philosophy. In his years in the seminary, he was the recipient of many awards and prizes in Talmud, philosophy, homiletics, and Bible. Rabbi Spratt now serves as Senior Associate Rabbi of Congregation Rodef Sholom and the Rabbi in Residence of Rodef Sholom School. His passion continues to be building community beyond existent walls and boundaries, something very important today. He started Shireinu, a new initiative for families with special needs that now serves as a model for synagogues and churches around the country. In partnership with Rabbi Josh Stanton of Temple B'nai Jeshurun, Ben co-founded Tribe, a joint initiative to engage Jewish millennials through grassroots leadership and empowerment. So what I would like to ask Rabbi Spratt is, of course, each tradition has so many wonderful and profound ideas, but each speaker has 5 minutes. So I want to ask him about two beautiful ideas in Judaism. One is the idea of justice, which has always been so important in the Jewish tradition, continues to be important, much to their credit. And also to weave into that idea of justice a beautiful and unique idea from Judaism about wrestling with God. I won't explain that. I'll let Rabbi Spratt explain it.
Thank you so much, Swami Atmarupananda. It's such an honor to be here and an honor of a panel of such distinguished thinkers and leaders. An honor to be with all of you and gratitude to the Vedanta Society for arranging for this moment of connection. So in the Jewish tradition, we reflect in the beginning In the beginning of this universe, there was chaos, and the first moves of creation were about creating balance. Were about ensuring that next to the darkness there was light, that waters below would be balanced by waters above. And from this, the idea of justice in Judaism has always been about balance. And the role of humanity is partnering with God to create and in many times restore that balance. In Hebrew, the root for justice is tzedek, and we are commanded over and over, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. For many of us, we think of this in a civil context. When we engage in some disobedience, the justice means punishment. But really, at the heart of justice in Judaism, it is the restoration of that balance. The idea of charity in Judaism is called tzedakah, which really is that same root, that charity in Judaism is not doing something loving of the heart, though it may be out of love of the heart. It is about economic rebalancing. It is about looking at the playing field of life, ensuring that we neither exist in peaks nor valleys, but we come together in some balanced playing field. The idea of the righteous person in Judaism is that same Hebrew root, is a tzaddik. A righteous person is one who creates, who restores balance in this world. And perhaps the best way to illustrate this, there is a teaching from the 8th century. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai imagines that there is a group of people on a boat. And at one moment, a man takes a drill and begins to drill a hole beneath his seat on the boat. The rest of the people on the boat say, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "Don't worry, it's not a problem. I'm just drilling under my seat. You're fine, nothing under your seat." And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai used this as an illustration of the delusion that so many of us operate in our world. That we believe that the injustice that another faces won't affect us. That the suffering of one does not ultimately lead to the suffering of another. And that in the restoration of balance, we are effectively trying to plug the holes of the ship, not just for ourselves, but for all. And this is meant to not just be some idea planted on us, but it's meant to come from a moral consciousness that comes from empathy. The primary core story in Judaism is the story of the Exodus. We are supposed to twice every day in the Jewish tradition reflect on the story of the ancient Israelites being enslaved in Egypt. And coming out of that slavery, they are given the gift of freedom, but it is a freedom that comes with responsibility. To again always remember what it was to be a slave. Remember always what it was to be the stranger in a strange land. So no matter where you go in life, your first impulse will be when you see a person suffering, when you see the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the poor person in your midst, it is your role, your obligation to lift them up as you were lifted up and your ancestors were lifting up. And so this is, in many ways, a nice reminder in the context of a Jewish tradition that it's an illusion to imagine that one religion or one faith can thrive while others struggle. For we either all rise together or we sink together. And what's interesting in the Jewish tradition is there's a bit of audacity in saying that this is so difficult for us. We should know that it's even difficult for God. One of the famous biblical stories is God looks down upon two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, filled with evil and corruption. Many have different ideas of what that entailed. And God decides, I'm going to wipe away these cities. And Abraham, the great patriarch of Judaism and Islam and Christianity, stands up in God's face and says, whoa, 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 whoa. What if there are 50 good people, righteous people, balance makers in the world? You're going to destroy these two cities even with 50 righteous people in them. And so God backs away. Abraham continues the negotiation. What about 40 people? What about 30, 20? What about 10 people? And it's in that moment that Abraham is celebrated as not being a God obeyer, but a God wrestler. The namesake Israel, Yisrael, actually means one who wrestles with God. And it is the reminder that even God at times struggles to create balance in this world. Even God struggles to see that we cannot sink everyone for the sake of a few, that all ultimately must be lifted up. And that part of our task at times is to even go and call God to task. When we see the injustices of the world, we should not be casting and shouting outward, but a reminder collectively, let us look around and see the collective boat that we sit on. Justice is ultimately acknowledging that collective perspective. From the place of empathy, seeing in our own suffering, the only path forward is if we take it upon our shoulders to lift all together as one.
Thank you, Rabbi Spratt. That was beautifully said, and I want to compliment him. He has an extraordinarily accurate biological clock.
That's right. Unusual for a rabbi.
Yes. So next, I would like to turn to Dr. Tony, or Antonios Kyriopoulos, known as Tony. Dr. Kyriopoulos is an Orthodox Christian theologian and is Associate General Secretary for International Affairs and Peace at the National Council of Churches. Prior to assuming this position this year, he was Executive Director of the United States Conference of Religions for Peace. Dr. Kyriopoulos holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in theology from Fordham University, a Master of Divinity degree from St. Vladimir's Orthodox Seminary, a Master of International Management from the American Graduate School of International Management, and a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service degree from Georgetown University. Dr. Kyriopoulos has more than 10 years of experience in nonprofit management, including administration, board relations, budgeting, development, program direction, and public relations. Previous to leading the United States Conference of Religions for Peace, he worked as special assistant to the Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, where his duties included representing the Greek Orthodox Church at the United Nations and at the U.S. State Department, and as the assistant to the Chancellor of the Orthodox Church in America in the area of executive communications. Among his affiliations, he is currently the president of the NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion or Belief. So the question that I would like to ask Tony, this distinguished panelist, is Jesus, the Christ. He, like all prophets of all religions, taught a strict moral code. And yet, Jesus often seems to favor the dispossessed over the high and mighty, favor the child over the sophisticated, to favor the sinner over the self-righteous. And so would he speak about this paradox of Jesus and what it means to us and in the modern world?
Let me begin by giving my thanks to Swami Sarvapriyananda and the Hindu Vedanta Society here in New York for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here and to share these thoughts and to be among friends. And certainly I want to thank my fellow panelists for our common work tonight. I met Swami Sarvapriyananda at the new dialogue that he mentioned, initiated this year by the NCC with the Hindu Vedanta Society of Los Angeles. And there I met Swami Sarvadevananda, and now I met Swami Atmarupananda. I always thought Greek names were difficult to pronounce. But the reason I mention all of this is it seems that relationships just keep growing from the seed of conversation. So I thank you again for this kind invitation and warm welcome. And it's a great honor for me to be a part of an event to celebrate the 125th anniversary of the address given by Swami Vivekananda at the Parliament of the World's Religions. You know, you always hear his name. I don't know about you, but in school we always hear his name, and people always cite that milestone in the event in the history of interfaith relations. So it's nice to be part of this remembrance. I think we can safely say, and actually the Swami did say it, that it was Swami Vivekananda's speech at the first Parliament in 1893 that brought Hinduism to the attention and certainly to the awareness of others and people of other faiths. To most people in the West, I think, it was probably an unknown. And yet its values, and here he was very smart, he spoke of tolerance and universal acceptance, affirming what others in the West already believed. And by comparing the two, the Eastern cultures and the Western cultures, it was through this and what the West already affirmed that he was able to state what Hinduism and other religions share. And tonight we're doing the same thing in a way. We're here exploring harmony among our religions, even as we're answering specific questions about our faiths and trying to relate them together and how my faith, the rabbi's faith, and other faiths fit into this exploration. And yet, harmony can be problematic because it raises in some people's minds a type of unity, I think, that isn't really so. For example, we do not share similar beliefs if we're talking about specific doctrines. For example, the understanding of Jesus among Christians, and here I'm fully cognizant of different views within Christianity of Jesus, but nevertheless, the traditional beliefs about Jesus as the Son of God or as one of the Holy Trinity, the crucified and risen Lord who brings salvation and is known to us through the Holy Spirit, certainly these would not be shared by those outside of Christianity. And this is even so perhaps most illustratively when it comes to Jewish and Muslim views of Jesus, even within what many cite as the Abrahamic construct for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Harmony might not even be the right word when we talk about other religions' views of the other. So if I continue with that Abrahamic construct, even favorable perspectives or ideas of Jesus, say as a prophet or the most glorious among the prophets, do not necessarily bring harmony in the sense of unity, because such favorable views may still nevertheless discount the truth claims made by the others. Now perhaps we get a little closer to this harmony when we talk about more philosophical ideas, like illumination or enlightenment, when we can talk about learning of the mind and opening of the heart to the other and the striving for the good. We may still be talking about different things, but most importantly, striving for illumination or enlightenment or the good, or to put it in another way that might be more familiar to Christians, to become like God, is the same task or a similar task for followers of all religions. To go within and to find the divine within ourselves. Yep, I think we're getting a little closer to what harmony might mean. And where we do find harmony most simply, however, is in how we regard other people when we talk about and live our lives. And here I'm going to get to this question that Swami Atmarupananda asked me about my faith as a Christian. I think it's when we talk about and we live our lives with tolerance for basic attitude, as our basic attitude toward another's faith, with acceptance of each other for who we are and each other's faith as integral to each other's being, even if we don't share those beliefs, with respect for each other and for our respective faiths, with recognition that each person is of equal dignity and worth before God and with one another, with love for the other because, in essence, the other is me, with forgiveness because we all fall short in a similar way. And this is where that paradox that you speak about comes in. There's a certain awareness that having a moral code, but yet giving preference to others, the poor, the marginalized, as the rabbi spoke, that preference, despite a universal kind of moral code, in essence, is because all people, especially the poor and the marginalized, are us. And since we all fall short of this moral code, we all are those poor people. We are the marginalized. And that's where the crux of that paradox comes in, is that because we are all sinners, we all fall short, we all have the same duty to embrace the other, especially those who are poor, marginalized, and otherwise. I think it's in these values that we find harmony, and I think this is central to my faith, certainly as a Christian, and to others of other faiths. And this is, I think, is where we see the harmony of our faiths. But most importantly, it is in our mutual desire, I believe, for social justice, for the well-being of all, for the repair of the world, as our Jewish brothers and sisters would say. I think that harmony is found. And here we can certainly learn from Swami Vivekananda, who saw his main task in Chicago 125 years ago, not to talk about religion so much, as to lift up the poverty and hunger of the Indian people, among others of other faiths to which he was speaking. For it is caring for others that our faith and the truth of the faith that we proclaim is revealed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Very beautifully expressed. Now I would like to turn to Daisy Khan. Daisy Khan is Executive Director of the Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality, which has the wonderful acronym WISE, a New York-based nonprofit organization dedicated to building a unified, compassionate change movement of Muslim women committed to creating a peaceful and equitable environment. Formerly, Ms. Khan served as Executive Director of the American Society for Muslim Advancement, where she spent the last 18 years creating groundbreaking inter- and intra-faith programs based on cultural and religious harmony through interfaith collaboration. She is a recipient of more than a dozen awards, the first recipient of the Charles Ansbacher Award, the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award, the Edinburgh Peace Award, and the Prophetic Voice Award. More magazine, that is a magazine named More magazine described her as a link between moderate Islam and the West. Women's E-News included her in their 21 Women of the 21st Century. The Huffington Post listed her as one of their top 10 women faith leaders. Time magazine mentioned her in their 100 Most Influential People of 2011. Ms. Khan's highly regarded and well-reviewed memoir, Born with Wings, was published this year by Random House. You can see what I meant when I said it's an honor to be among all of these panelists. Each one of them has an extraordinary life and accomplishments. So, as with any tradition, with Islam also, there are many things that I could have asked Daisy Khan, but I chose the question of the Ummah, U-M-M-A, the idea in Islam of the community, what Martin Luther King called the beloved community. I asked about that for selfish reasons, because I myself am interested in the concept, because Swami Vivekananda said that he wanted India to have an Islamic body, meaning an Islamic social body. That is, that he had great regard for the idea of equality preached among Muslims. And also something beautiful I read about the Prophet Muhammad, a very small thing, but indicative of the greatness of this great man, was that in spite of his being the great prophet, and the prophet of Islam, the prophet of Allah, that he was the first to salute people in the morning. He was a man of such stature that he could have waited for others to come to him and salute him, but he was the first to salute others, showing his greatness through such a small act. So I'll ask Daisy Khan to speak about the Ummah, what it means and what it means for us today.
Thank you very much, and namaskar to everyone. I want to thank Swami Sarvapriyananda and Swami Atmarupananda. Did I get that right?
Very good. You've been practicing.
I'm Indian, so I should at least know how to say these names. And also Diane, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be back here again. And I have just returned from India. And anytime I see things going wrong in India, I think of this community here. You all come in front of me Because for all the wrong that's going on there, I think of what this community can do. How can we replicate our numbers? How can we take this that is going on here and bring this reasoning and this thinking to the nation that is going through such a difficult time? So I'm here for that reason, because I love being amongst you, brothers and sisters. As you know, I grew up in Kashmir. I was born in a Muslim home. I was sent to Catholic school. Tony, I want you to know, I think I've done the Lord's Prayer more than you. At least 3,000 times in my life, every morning. My professors were Hindu. I climbed mountains and trees with Sikh girls. We bought freshwater pearls from Buddhists, and we were always told that we were from the lost 10th tribe of Israel. So at the age of 15, I came to America and landed in a Jewish neighborhood. So at a very young age, I had learned the value of different religions. Intolerance, stereotyping was nowhere. We didn't even know what it was. We just knew that at time of Diwali, people came to our home with a cake, and at time of Eid, we went to them. That was the kind of relationship that we had. But as with many things, when I came to America, I went through an identity crisis similar to what many people go through at a young age, and I lost my way. I professed that I didn't believe in anything anymore. I walked away from God, and then I went on a spiritual journey. And during that spiritual journey, I had to do a little delving into myself, and I discovered that actually I was not all these multiple confusing identities. My main identity, that I was a spark of the divine that was put into my body at the time of my birth. And then I discovered that this spark of the divine was actually placed in every human being, and that we are all born with the same spark of the divine, all 6 billion of us. And that's what gives us our human identity. And that's what gives us the human dignity. And the Quran then mentions this concept in a very precise way. So there's a concept called Ummah Wahida, a term that literally means one community, a body of believers who are divinely mandated to uphold justice and compassion, united by a shared belief in God and a divine plan in the hereafter. And God doesn't say what the divine plan is and how it is. Is it the Muslim plan? Is it the Hindu plan? This is just the definition. But the word also has a concept. It has 3 meanings. It's a meaning of movement, a goal to reach, and a conscious choice that you make to reach that goal. So not everybody is actually adhering to the goal or trying to reach to the goal. And it literally means people who are on the way to this goal. This is exemplified most uniquely during the Hajj, the annual pilgrimage that you all see every year, where a couple of million people are coming from all over the world on their way to trying to touch the house of God, to be in his presence. All ethnicities, all races, all colors from all over the world, speaking different languages, participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood. One ummah, one nation. This is where the concept comes from. But the Quran also goes a little further and says, by the way, you guys aren't unique, you human beings. That this is not only for Muslims, this ummah extends to all of God's creation. And that God has made all of his creation as members of the ummah, including the animal kingdom and the insects and everything else. So here's a verse of the Quran that says, every beast that crawls on earth and every bird that flies with 2 wings has formed communities like you. And so we have left nothing out of this book. And later on, they will be gathered up by their Lord. So it becomes very clear to us that humans and all creatures cannot be excluded from this ummah, that we are actually all part of the same identity. And man's worth in the eyes of God is not defined by their color, their nationality, or their ethnicity. It's primarily defined by how good you are and how much you adhere to God's plan. The difference of race, color, social status are incidental. The Quran says, I have created you into nations and tribes so you may get to know one another. That's what the purpose of all this diversity is. So I can be very interested to know what does the Jewish faith have to say? If it were all the same, it would be kind of boring, right? We'd all think the same, we'd all be the same, be no diversity. And then the true stature of man in the eyes of God is more about, what you do and the good deeds that you do. So this is something that is the article of the Muslim faith. It's not something that, it's not a supposition. It's something that we really truly have to believe in. We believe that all human beings are created equal in the eyes of God because they're created by the same supreme God. We believe all human beings belong to the human race and share equally in the common parentage. We do believe that we all come from Adam and Eve. And I always think about how did Muslim rulers rule over India, which was primarily all Hindu and Buddhists and maybe Sikhs. And so they extended this concept of Adamiya, meaning children of Adam. And they said, every person in this land is a child of Adam. So therefore, we extend the same dignity to them. So that's why much of India remained Hindu, and people, that Hinduism was considered a legitimate faith. It wasn't like disbelievers, the kind of stuff you hear now. So then God is just and kind to all his creatures. He's not partial to any race, religion, or age. The whole universe is his dominion, and this is why, and all of the creatures that live in it. All people are born equal in the sense that everybody does not bring a single possession with them. Perhaps maybe the only thing that we bring with us is our destiny, whatever we're destined to do. And when we leave with nothing. We come with nothing and we leave with nothing. And this is part of every tradition, right? You become ash and dust and we get buried into the earth and we don't take anything with us. So in 622, to wrap it up, Prophet Muhammad drafted a constitution of Medina because the revelation was coming. This is what he was hearing. He referred to the Christians that were surrounding him, the Jews, where there were different Jewish tribes, and the pagans, which were really the people that he was surrounded by, because Mecca was a pagan society. And he said that all of these are members of the one ummah. So he actually granted them equal rights. And he said, all creation is one family dependent upon God. Whoever treats the creation of God the best is loved by God the most. And in 632, before he was about to depart on his last sermon, he said to his people, because he knew that a day would come when his people would not live up to the ideals. So he said, O people, listen well to my words, for I do not know whether after this year I shall ever be amongst you again. Therefore, listen to what I'm saying to you very carefully and take these words to those who could not be present here today. So I'm sharing these words with you. Imagine this is 632. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. A non-Arab has any superiority over the Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over white, except by piety and good action. One of the requirements of the Ummah is also to have a good leader who can lead us along the path towards this goal. To the Muslims, Prophet Muhammad, as the Swami mentioned, was such a leader. He was a great man, and he was an exemplary leader because his life, and he lived a very ethical life, and he was a great human being. He made it his social mission to create an inclusive community where there were warring factions everywhere. In fact, some of the tribes where he had gone to Yathrib were fighting, and the tribes actually chose him because they knew he was a fair man. And they said, you are our leader, even though they were not Muslim. And he did not believe in coercion. He did not believe in persecution. And anything that is happening in his name right now is not the truth of who he is. And this is why we need to spread this message to you, to my fellow Muslims all over the world, because a crime against religion is a crime against God. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy. Now I would like to turn to Dr. Shailendra Palvia. Dr. Palvia is a tenured professor of management at the CW Post Campus of Long Island University. From 1997 to 2004, he was the Director of Management Information Systems at Long Island University. He earned a PhD and an MBA from the University of Minnesota and a BS in Chemical Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, in New Delhi. Dr. Palvia's research interests include management of the systems development process and the human, social, and global issues of IT. He has published over 150 refereed articles in journals, conference proceedings, and books. He has co-edited 4 books on the theme of global IT and electronic commerce management. In the year 2016-17, he received the prestigious Fulbright Nehru Senior Scholar Fellowship Award for that year. So I'll ask Dr. Palvia Shailendra the question. There are 2 beautiful philosophical doctrines in Jainism. There are many, but there are 2 that I'm especially interested in asking him about this evening. One is called Syadvada. Don't let that Sanskrit word scare you. Syadvada and Anekantavada. So I will ask Dr. Palvia to explain what those mean and what relevance they have to us today.
Thank you very much. You will have noticed that I am the only one on this dais who is not a preacher or who does not have a degree in religion. I am a practitioner of religion. So you will get a different perspective from me. And I want to profusely thank Diane and Paritosh Kumar, who has been given a lot of care for us in terms of inviting and bringing us to this place today. And I would also like to thank Swami Atmarupananda and Swami Sarvapriyananda. And we had a good discussion in the so-called green room, so we know each other quite well. This is the occasion of 125th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda giving his most memorable speech, which we heard today at the Chicago Conference in 1893. We must notice that there were 2 other religions that were represented at that society from India. One was Buddhism and one was Jainism. So we have a Buddhism scholar here. He will mention the name of that representative. I don't want to steal your thunder. The representative from Jain religion was Sri Veerchand Raghavbhai Gandhi. And his speech was also extremely well received at the Chicago Conference. And Swami Vivekananda, Sri Veerchandji developed a great friendship and affinity for each other. Not only that, after the conference, he stayed in USA for 2 years and 1 year in UK and gave several lectures on Jainism. And Herbert Warren, who studied Jainism under Veerchand Gandhi and adopted Jain religion, published a book on Gandhi's lectures titled Herbert Warren's Jainism. I want to quickly move on to the question our moderator has posed before he scolds me if I go into other directions. But I want to touch upon one more thing. The theme of this conference is harmony among religions. So in my practitioner's terms, simply stated, each religion articulates ways to achieve peace and happiness. Isn't that the goal for all religions? Ultimate goal being to attain eternal peace and happiness, which we call moksha. Therein lies the harmony of all religions. True happiness means attaining the state of vitaragi, meaning devoid of rag or devoid of all passions of attachment and aversion, devoid of anger, greed, ego, deception. When that happens, you remain unaffected by praise or criticism and continue to walk the path of happiness. Coming to his question, Jainism is based on 3 main pillars: an overarching philosophy of ahimsa, That means unconditional non-violence for all living beings, not just the human beings. Aparigraha, non-possession, and anekantvad, which is the topic he has assigned me to speak on, and its companion. Anekantvad and Syadvad are their companions, they are complement of each other. Ek dusre ke purak hain wo. So anekantvad is nothing but multiplicity of viewpoints, and it is the concept of having the ability to respect diverse perspectives on any issue. So we might have diverse perspectives right now, and we'll respect each other's views. You can see that clearly. And you might have heard about the famous parable of 5 blind men trying to define an elephant. So one blind man touches the trunk, and he thinks it is the branch of a tree. Another blind man touches the belly, the tummy, and says it is a big wall. Another blind man touches the foot, and he thinks it is the trunk of the tree, or it's a pillar. Another one touches the tail, and he thinks it is a rope. Another one touches the ear, and he thinks it is the hand fan. So each one of us have partial perspective of the whole truth. So we should always be aware of this fact and respect other views on any issue. That is the sure way to learn the full truth. This is the doctrine of anekantvad. When we are free from dogmas, almost all world's conflicts and controversies can be solved or diffused with meaningful negotiations and compromises. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "I advise a man not from my standpoint, but from his. I try to put myself in his shoes. When I cannot do so, I refuse to advise." This is even better than the golden rule of ethics, which everybody knows. Do unto others as you wish others to do to you. So it is saying, do it not just reciprocal, do what the other person expects. So there's a platinum rule, we call it. Sarva dharma sambhav means accepting great principles from all religions in the context of your religion's principles. That is, avoid dogmas from all religions. I'm pretty much coming to the end. Then what is Syadvad? Syadvad is nothing different. It is 2 sides of the same coin. To explain anekantvad, we invoke the principle of Syadvad, which is relativism. Syad means from a particular point of view or in a sense. And vad means narration or description. One can be rich and poor at the same time, depending on who you compare against. And how do you make a line smaller without erasing it? Everybody heard that quiz, right? So it's a question of relativity. And look at me. I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a mamaji, I'm a chachaji, I'm a fufaji, I'm a masaji at the same time. So I cannot say I'm only the professor at LIU Post, or I'm only the panelist at this session. So that would be it. My biological clock was good? Extremely good, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't too bad. Now, I will ask Scott Tusa to speak from the standpoint of Buddhism. He's a Buddhist teacher based in Brooklyn, New York, ordained by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, no less. He spent 9 years as a Buddhist monk, with much of that time engaged in solitary meditation retreat and study in the United States, India, and Nepal. Since his early 20s, he has trained in Buddhist philosophy and meditation with some of the greatest living masters, including Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, and Tulku Sangag Rinpoche. He now teaches meditation and Buddhist psychology nationally and supports Tsoknyi Rinpoche's Pundarika Sangha as a practice advisor. Scott Tusa is a featured speaker at various institutes such as the Mindful Meditation Center, Tibet House, Nalanda Institute, Dharma Punks, and Insight LA. He has also been featured at many meditation organizations and communities such as Against the Stream, the Den Meditation, the Ocean of Compassion, the Ocean of Compassion Buddhist Center, Vajrapani Institute, and the Shantideva Meditation Center. So now the question I would like to ask Scott is, Buddhism speaks about awakening. And so I want to ask him, awakening from what and awakening into what, and why should the modern world care? Isn't it enough just to get up in the morning? So, Scott.
So thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And getting the questions in an email, I thought, oh boy, those are some big, big ones to cover. But nonetheless, I'll try to make it succinct and hopefully something you can enjoy. So as far as awakening in Buddhism, here we have many words that we can use in the English language, such as enlightenment, sometimes used, liberation we also use. And just like Swamiji is implying, awakening from what and awakening into what, yeah? So strangely, the awakening from what is a little bit easier to talk about and describe than the awakening into what, right? So I'll start with that. So the Buddha, he described this within the First Noble Truth of dukkha, where upon awakening or attaining enlightenment, once he actually gave his first sermon to his first 5 disciples, it was on these 4 noble truths. The first truth being the truth of dukkha. And dukkha, as a Sanskrit word, is quite difficult to translate directly into English because some people use the term suffering to represent dukkha, some use dissatisfaction, some use pain, or maybe even stress, I've heard. But it actually includes all of these. So it basically includes the dissatisfactory experiences that we inevitably have to experience within life, yeah? And so the Buddha didn't point this out to bum us out, or to make our lives more difficult by, oh, what I'm going to do now, I have this dukkha thing, what do I do with this, yeah? He merely was trying to get us clued into that this dukkha is pervasive within our experience, and it has many levels, from more grosser to subtler levels, and that actually we don't have to be caught in that dukkha. So that's the main point, that there's, in the second noble truth, there's a cause for that dukkha, right? That it's caused by, usually we say, afflictive emotions and karmic habituation. And therefore, because it has a cause, we can eliminate that cause, right? So when we say awakening from, we would say awakening from this very dukkha itself. Because just as this dukkha seems like, we use the examples of like oil, it seems like oil in a cloth is inevitably part of the cloth, right? But it's not, yeah? With some vigorous cleaning, it can be removed. So the Buddha taught to know dukkha so we could also know its removal and how to eliminate it. So really, I would say here, when we're looking at it, at also summing it up, essentially we're talking about awakening from a type of confusion. At the root, we would say awakening from a kind of misperception, or the Buddha often uses analogies like a dream, an illusion, waking up into reality as it is. So I can also use the word more simply, just awakening from projection. Yeah, and I think we all have some relationship to this, because I know, for me personally, if my partner sort of says something I don't like, or I'm having a disagreement of some kind, and then I can get stuck in my projection around that, when there might have been something else meant, right? Similarly, we all have language as a symbolic form of communication to talk about a certain issue or describe something, but at the end of the day, we're actually using our projections to refer to these. We all say chair, and we agree on what that looks like, but that image and experience of a chair is also a projection to a certain degree. Of course, the projection is very useful because we can also sit in it, right? So for a Buddhist, this isn't really a problem, that we can sit in the chair. But for a Buddhist, this is a problem, that we can The problem is when we believe our projection about that chair to be ultimately real in the way it appears to us, right? So, getting back to the second part of the question, so this is what we're trying to awaken from dukkha, which is built on a projection, right? Or built within a dream. And so the Buddha's perspective is whether that dream is a good dream or a bad dream, it's still the dream. And there's a chance that we can awake from that. So like I said, it's a little bit more difficult to describe what we're awakening into. But I'm going to use a quote from a sutra of the Buddha to talk about this a little bit. So upon awakening, so the story goes that the Buddha awakened to enlightenment after some rigorous practice and a life of seeking, right? Under a Bodhi tree in present-day Bodh Gaya. Yeah? And if many of you, I'm sure, have been, I encourage you to go. It's an amazing, wonderful place. And an ancestor of this tree still sits there. And so upon awakening, the Buddha just stayed silent. Yeah? And so for a Buddhist, this is actually considered as the Buddha's first teaching. His first teaching was silence. And then, after he sat for a while, it said that the god Brahma actually came down and said, "Hey, Buddha, we got to do something, you know? What you've awakened to is amazing. Can you please teach others how to attain this same awakening? Or what is it that you've attained?" And this is what the Buddha said. He said, "Profound, peaceful, beyond constructs, luminous and unconditioned. I have found a nectar-like Dharma. Whomever I teach it to will not understand, so I will stay silent here in the forest." So again, we consider this as part of his first teaching. But what's profound in here is of course, there's a profundity to the silence itself, because it's pointing at the nature of what he awakened into, yeah? But there's also this description of profound, peaceful, beyond constructs, luminous and unconditioned. He calls it a nectar-like Dharma that he's found, which was internal. It wasn't external. It was coming from his own experience, his own nature, right? Uncovering or recognizing that. And so even the Buddha, in a certain way, had a difficulty describing what we are awakening into. So yeah, so you could see I'm going to struggle through this. But what we could say is, what we're awakening into is a tricky question, because from a Buddhist perspective, the part of our conundrum, part of this dukkha I was talking about earlier, of what binds us actually, of this projection or illusion we're apparently in, and what's providing our sort of suffering or this existence of dissatisfaction. Part of the idea here is that then we need to get out of that, and we would awaken into something else, some other kind of experience, some other kind of identity, some other kind of personality, perhaps a heaven or a hell or some other circumstance. And this is a little bit of a problem for a Buddhist, because the idea, if you awaken to a heaven, then there's still the problem of the opposite of that, or the duality of that there's a hell, right? So there's always the possibility for that. So when we're talking about awakening out of this projection and into enlightenment, or sometimes we would say wisdom of non-duality or something like that, really it's more like an extinguishment of the dukkha itself. So rather than awakening into something else, another personality, another thing, it's the mere absence of what's obstructing awakening in the first place, yeah? So a good example we often see in Buddhist sutras is like a dust in the eye, and when that dust is removed, there's just clear seeing, right? So we often talk about this in the Buddhist tradition as within Vipassana practice, or we call prajna, which means insight or wisdom, yeah? As this clearly seeing how things actually are. So it's kind of very challenging, because it's asking us to almost to look into another option, that our current way of seeing ourselves in the world is maybe skewed a little bit. So it's very challenging, yeah? So I think, yeah. So I think I didn't really get to answer why this is useful, but I think we can see implicit within it, right? The usefulness of basically the idea that the world's problems are not coming from necessarily an outer reference, though of course we could see they do, but they come from our very notion of how we're identifying with our experience and our perception and how we're seeing and viewing the world around us than others. So the idea here is that what the Buddha awakened to when he said profound, luminous, peaceful, this also has an element of deep, non-referential compassion that, not unlike some of the speakers spoke of tonight, yeah? Of an ability to see oneself in another and another in oneself. And so therefore, but that comes from inwards. It does not come from solving necessarily all of the problems of the world. So this is very much, yeah, I would stop there maybe, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm sorry that I cut you off there, but now it's actually time for the break. Can we take 5 minutes for Swami Sarvapriyananda? Oh, okay, because otherwise all of the hour is gone. So let me introduce Swami Sarvapriyananda very briefly, and then I'll ask him to address you, and then we'll have the break. So Swami Sarvapriyananda has been minister and spiritual leader of the Vedanta Society of New York since January 2017. Prior to this, he served as the assistant minister of the Vedanta Society of Southern California for 13 months, beginning in the end of 2015. He joined the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission in 1994. He had his sannyasa in 2004. And he has held several important positions within the order before he came to the West. He's an internationally known speaker, and I will say, because he won't say it, but I will say for him that he's one of the best speakers of the whole order. He speaks in English, Hindi, Bengali, and Oriya, so he can speak in 4 different languages. And so I'll ask the Swami to answer to speak about the idea in Vedanta that the whole universe is a manifestation of one reality, a non-dual reality. And everything within manifestation has never lost its identity with that non-dual spiritual source. And so what does that say to us, and what does it say to the problems of the modern world?
Thank you, Maharaj. Actually, when I'm called upon to explain Hinduism to school students, I've had that opportunity on the West Coast, on the East Coast. I say any question you ask about Hinduism, the answer is yes and no. Do you believe in God? Yes and no. Is God male? Yes and no. So and so on. The reason for this enormous diversity, tremendous diversity actually in Hinduism, the reason is, as the Swami pointed out, the ultimate reality is considered to be infinite and also ultimately beyond conception and language. So that which cannot be grasped completely by thought and expressed completely in language, when you try to express it in language, there'll be multiplicity. You can have many, many ways of conceiving of the ultimate reality and expressing it. So one of the most ancient teachings of the Vedas is ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise speak of it differently. The result has been that not only is this a very clever and intelligent and a very wonderful philosophical conclusion, those of us who are from India, we know this is somehow incredible. It's gone into the culture of the people. So all over India, for thousands of years, this has sort of been part of the folk understanding of religion, if I might put it that way. I have seen in our main monastery in Belur Math, our main monastery there, ordinary people, who may not be very educated, who certainly don't know Sanskrit, or in the thousands streaming towards the river Ganga for a dip on a particular holy day. They go past a mosque just outside the monastery, and I've seen many of them sort of, genuflecting, just bowing down like that, because it's a place where God is worshipped. So that kind of understanding, that because the ultimate reality is infinite, and it can be worshipped in different ways, it led to enormous diversity within Hinduism. And when Hinduism encountered other religions, Islam and Christianity especially, so the automatic understanding was Yes, this is another form of worship of God. And that was almost natural without any kind of resistance. Sri Ramakrishna put it this way. He said that like in a village pond, people go to take water from it, and they call it by different names. The Hindus call it jal, and the Muslims call it pani. They all mean water. And the Englishmen call it aqua, but I don't know if any Englishmen actually do call it aqua. And so on. So this idea that the ultimate reality can have different conceptions and can have different names, this is very implicit in Hindu culture. Another idea which is important is that of realization. Not just in Hinduism, but in Buddhism, Jainism, the whole point of religion was to transform our lives, to overcome suffering, as Scott was just saying. And by reaching enlightenment, realization, moksha, nirvana, kaivalya, whatever you call it, different words for it. Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda in this country, he said, religion is realization, not giving intellectual assent to some doctrines, believing in some doctrines. So religion is realization. Now, when you put these two ideas together, the infinitude of the ultimate reality and religion is realization, then you get a new idea of religion as a method, a path. So religions become, now the advantage is, if you consider religion a path to realization of the infinite reality, in that case, you can have multiple paths. One doesn't have a problem because your Google Maps says this way and the iPhone app says that way, though I say they have debates and problems, but both ways get you to the destination, different ways. So all the differences between religions, the doctrines, the special teachings, they're all valid in their own way. So Sri Ramakrishna put it this way, Jato mat tato path. As many faiths, so many paths to the realization of the divine. What does this mean to us? We can discuss it later, maybe, but Sri Ramakrishna in his own life, for example, he never ever criticized religion, any religion. That's one thing. Another thing you notice in his life is he took an active interest in different religions and he saw them and practiced them on their own terms, not in a Hindu way of understanding Islam or Christianity, but in an Islamic way of understanding Islam, a Christian way of understanding Christianity. That's another thing, seeing religion from inside, not from outside. And learning from other religions. That's the one thing I'll end with, which is very relevant here, which I was listening to all the speakers, is that you get wonderful new insights when you listen to the teachers of other religions. Swami Atmarupananda ji, he is my elder brother in monastic life, and I've learned many things from him. One very valuable thing I learned from him, he has enormous experience in interfaith work. And he told me once, I don't think he remembers, over coffee in the monastery in India, he said, when you meet teachers of different religions, always listen to what they teach and don't listen to what they criticize. So, yes, thank you.
Thanks to all of the panelists, and I appreciate the contributions of all of them, as I'm sure all of you did. So we will be back after a break of 15 minutes. We'll have a break of 15 minutes, then we'll come back, and there'll be a chance for you to ask them questions. Any of them individually, if you have a particular question for a particular panelist, or if you want to throw a question to the panel in general. So please come back in 15 minutes, and we'll have engagement with the panel.